Hello, welcome to this week's episode of What One Thing. One business, one story, one lesson to take away in action every week for small business owners looking to grow. I'm Phil Davenport.
And I'm Hayley Baxter, and we have the pleasure of talking to the lovely Emma Hine today. Would you like to introduce yourself, Emma?
Hi, absolutely. Thank you, first of all, Phil and Hayley, for having me. I'm super excited. So I'm Emma Hine, business strategist and mentor, and I help people to build a business that they love, a business that is built on their terms and one that doesn't completely drain their lives.
So we're going to start, though, Emma, by going back to before you started your business and what your journey was, or the events that led up to you becoming self-employed and working for yourself.
Okay, so we're really going back in time. I started my first business back in 2000, and that business was created not because I didn't enjoy my job in corporate. I absolutely did enjoy the job that I'd got in corporate, but I just felt I wanted a little bit more freedom, more flexibility, more opportunities to, I suppose, be me and do things my way. So I started an e-commerce business. That was sort of like my beginning.
I love it. I'm interested. So, 2006, you're in a corporate role. I assume probably doing something, because I know that you're an intelligent person, I'm probably doing something very smart. And then you make the switch to get an e-commerce business up and running. What was the kind of trigger? What would you say was the ignition moment where you went, you know what, I'm done kind of on the big boat. I want to set sail myself now.
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple of things that triggered it, really. One, there was the bit I just spoke about when I was just like, I enjoy what I do. I was a sales and regulatory change manager. I managed a team of people, and we were responsible for all of the processes and the regulation across the branch network and the direct sales channel. So it was a busy old job, but I did enjoy it. So there was me wanting that freedom piece, but at the same time, my husband, who had given up his job as a financial advisor to do something we'd always wanted to do, which was to build a house, he had just come to the end of that, and it was just like, well, what can he do? So there were sort of both of us in this moment of what can we do. One morning, I woke up. By the side of my bed, I'd got a birthday card. Don't know whose birthday it was, but it was somebody's birthday. I got this birthday card ready to write, and my line was, do you know, nobody sells those online? And that was it. That was the moment that business was first sort of created, really.
That's amazing. And so going back to, and did you just go all in first of all,
No.
or was it a slow journey to get there?
It was a slow but a fast journey, I suppose, because, you know, it can take years and years and years, can't it, to get yourself to a point where, you know, you consider your business to be at that level that it's financially stable and successful. So it was slow in the sense that we had no money to put into this business. We started from ground zero. So we sort of started very slowly. We didn't know what we were doing either. We hadn't got a clue. Okay, I'd got a good job. I knew strategy and all of that type of stuff. But it's a whole different world having your own business. So it started very slowly. You know, we went to wholesalers and found a few products, sold a few bits on eBay, just had a little taste and a feel for what it felt like. And it took I'm going to say about 18 months to get to a point where we thought, do you know what, we've actually got something here, and maybe it's the time for me to hand in my notice and walk away from that corporate career, which I did. I had to wait 3 months because I got a 3-month notice period. So I walked away from my corporate career in December 2008, which was about 20 months after we've sold the first product.
I love that, because there's such a journey, isn't there, between you think as an employee that you can kind of run a business and everything's simple and it just needs to be this, and the difference to have that entrepreneurial mindset is huge. Was your husband just actively in the business for those 20 months then, and you were kind of supporting it financially through your role?
Exactly that, yeah. So I kept my job going because we'd got the children all younger then, so that meant that we could afford to pay the bills and the mortgage and all of those things that we'd got to do. And he did a lot of the lead work, and I just helped in the evenings. But by the time I left in December 2008, it was way too much for one person. So sort of I left my corporate job, and within a few months we'd moved into our first premises, because the house at this point had been taken over by stock. We moved into our first warehouse. We took on our first staff member, because we knew that if we wanted to grow the business, we couldn't just be doing the do constantly. So yeah, it sort of went whoosh from there.
I love it.
And is there something that you decided to do, a decision that you made early on in that business journey that you're really glad that you made that decision?
Do you know what? I wish I had made some business decisions at this early stages of that business journey, because I literally hadn't got a plan other than something to keep my husband busy and something to get me out of my corporate job. There was absolutely no plan in terms of, what this was going to look like, what we were going to grow it into. We literally winged it. And that probably is the one thing that, well, that definitely isn't a problem. That is the one thing that we absolutely should have done at the beginning, but we didn't.
So because you had this business, you had the business you had it for quite a long time, didn't you?
Yeah. I mean, officially only closed down. Yeah, only officially closed down last year, but we stopped trading fully in 2022. But in 2021, we made some massive changes. But officially, closure was only last year.
So tell us a little bit about the journey that you went on to get to that point, to make that decision to begin to close down your business.
Yeah. Okay. So the business, once there was 2 of us working in there full time, and we brought in that staff member to help with the picking and packing and all of that type of stuff, the business was able to grow quite quickly. We were able to source new products. We were able to spend more time investing money back into the business to get more customers to come and buy from us. So the business grew very, very quickly. And we went from having, 1 staff member, a small premises, to a bigger premises, then an even bigger premises. I think it was about 7,000 square feet was the warehouse that we were in towards the end. There were green cards, that's quite a lot of stock. It wasn't just cards at that point. So we were able to venture into a lot more stuff and more people. I think we had a team of 9 at one point. So it just grew and grew and grew and grew. And, we reached a point where the average turnover was really high 6 figures. It used to sit around about £800,000-900,000 for years. It stayed there pretty stable at that amount. Eventually we pushed it over, and we were turning over in excess of £1 million every year. That's revenue, just to be clear here. So we were turning over in excess of £1 million every year. But what happened during that time is, because we had been so focused on nothing, as in we hadn't got a strategic plan, we didn't really know where we were taking the business. We'd sort of let it take over what we were doing. So we became absorbed by the business. The business sort of became our lives. The things that I left my corporate job for, the freedom, the flexibility, none of that existed. It was work, go on holiday, some amazing holidays. No, just sit in your hotel room and work while the children are in the pool and doing that sort of stuff. So the business literally consumed our lives, which was not what we wanted. But because we'd never really done that strategic piece that says, what is the vision, that just sort of happened. And that affected my mental health. I suppose I had a breakdown. I completely burnt out. I reached the point of, I physically cannot do this anymore. And so eventually the point came where I thought, right, something has to give. But I was exhausted. I was drulled down. There was nothing left for me to give in terms of looking at selling the business, because the business was making good money. It was completely sellable. But I knew that when you sell a business, it's not like selling a house, is it? You go through a process, you sell, you walk away, that's it. You never have to see it again. When you sell a business, normally there's terms and conditions in there, contract things where you've got to stay in there and support. And I physically hadn't got that left in me. So for me, the only alternative at that point was to do what felt like the absolute right decision. And to this day, I still know it is, was just to say, I'm shutting the doors. I just can't do this anymore. And that's sort of what I did.
Wow. I mean, that's super powerful. I know in our industry, we were talking about this just last week, and we were talking about head junk, and we were talking about attracting sometimes the wrong customers at the wrong price, not realising that, and then taking on more customers and bringing in more business and more, and your turnover goes up, and you think, okay, this is brilliant, but then you need more staff, and then you need more customers and and then you need more staff, and you're actually building this bigger and bigger problem. And it's, as you say, all because you've not set that plan out, looked at your costs and set price based on costs, as opposed to price based on what do I think people are going to pay, what would people be happy to pay.
Exactly that. And it's also when you think about having a team, it's how you utilise that team. This is stuff that I knew. I'd worked in strategy for years prior to that in corporate, so I knew what I should be doing. But it was almost like I switched off. I'm no longer corporate, I'm doing what I want to do, and not giving any thought to any of the structure, the strategy, the stuff that really does matter. And with a bigger team, with a bigger premises, becomes bigger outgoings, becomes bigger responsibility. So you reach the point where you think, I've got to just keep going, because if I don't, it's not just my life that's affected anymore. And that was exactly the point that we were at.
I mean, at those points, what did your day-to-day look like?
Oh gosh, working 19 hours a day, getting a bit of sleep, drinking a lot of wine to get myself through the day, skipping meals, losing a lot of weight, being unhappy, not getting to do the things that I was meant to do with my children. I was doing way too much. When I say my husband as well, we were doing way too much working in the business, on the shop floor, instead of being, in our offices doing the things that we should have been doing, the things that would have enabled that business to continue in a much better way. If I could get my hands on that business right now and it was somebody else's, I'd have a field day, because there was so much that we could have done differently that would have made it an amazing business to either keep or sell. But hey, we learn, don't we?
We definitely do. So bringing it a bit more up to the present day, talk a little bit about, because you had the business, you made the decision to close it, but you didn't just go and get a job or do anything normal. You decided to start another business. So talk a little bit about that journey and why you made those decisions, really.
Yeah, I mean, no, I didn't do anything normal. I say that I spent a year doing what I always talk about. I went off to an island to find myself. There was no island, but I did go and spend pretty much a year really exploring who I was, what I wanted, what I needed. So all of that stuff that I should have done right at the beginning of that business, I sat and thought through all of that. And what kept coming back to me over and over again is, I don't want anybody else to ever do what I've done. I don't want anybody else to ever feel they've built a business that has taken over their lives, because I don't think they have to. Now, I'm not saying you don't have to work hard. Growing a business is hard. No making that sound any nicer than it is. It is hard, but it shouldn't be a permanent thing. You don't want to make that your permanent thing. So I just knew I needed to do something that would help other people to build a business that they actually enjoyed, a business that didn't take over their lives. It took me a while to realise that I was the right person to do that, because I thought, Emma, you've done such a rubbish job of doing this. How on earth can you help other people? But then I realised that actually, because of all of those mistakes I've made, because of all that learning I've had, because I've grown the business, I have a lot of experience, a lot of things that I can share with people. So that's sort of where Emma Hine strategy came from. It came from a point of, I want to help people to be happy in business.
And that's a great, it's an ethos, I don't know what the right word is, to have, because you're absolutely right. And I think that the situation that you were in, I think actually amongst business owners, particularly new business owners, is very common, because you go from being this not big, but you work in the corporate, you're sort of at the top of your game, aren't you? You've got a great job, you're in corporate, you know what you're doing, you're probably managing a team, you think, I can start a business because I've got all those skills, you go to do it, and actually you're at the bottom of the hill.
So I think, as I say, Emma, from what you've said, what really resonates with me is that constant churn and that grind. I think so many businesses are just looking to grow, but not realising that actually systemization and profitability are the real goals, that you can remove yourself and start having fun in the business and start enjoying it. I mean, I always think of it as like marathon training. We know so many people who do marathon training, they love it and they get this jubilation, but if your marathon was every week, all of a sudden that's an absolute grind, and now trying to run flipping 26 miles is horrific, and you're grafting through it with no way out. I mean, what's the difference between what your day looks like today and how it looked like, I don't know, what would be 5 years ago?
Oh, they're absolute worlds apart, completely worlds apart. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not earning the money I was earning back then. But, they are absolute worlds apart in the sense that, how my life looks now is it's flexible. I've got freedom. I've just spent 2 months living in Spain, working in between coming here and being there. spending 2 days in Spain previously would have been an impossibility. Friends will ask me to go for coffee and I can go. I can go to events, I can host events. I'm smiling. I look at photos of me going back even 5 years ago or even 3 years ago when I first started this, and you can just see the difference. People have that sparkle in their eye. I've got that sparkle in my eye because I am actually choosing how I work, who I work with, how I do it. And also I'm controlling, rightly or wrongly right now, how much money I earn, so I can make sure that whatever I do in terms of my growth structure is done in a way that works for me. So the absolute worlds apart. That thing that I wanted back in 2006, I finally got it.
That's really amazing. And it's actually very inspirational, Emma, that you stand up and almost live the dream. Which, a lot of the reasons why people start businesses is because they want that kind of, not idealistic lifestyle, but a lifestyle where they can choose what they do and how they spend their time. So I think that's really amazing. On business journeys, we always get help along the way. Sometimes I think when you're starting a business, you don't think it's okay to ask for help. Who's helped you most on your business journey?
In my early business journey, another one of Emma's didn't do that mistakes, I never asked for help. I had a fear of people thinking that if I asked for help, it made me look weak, it made me look like I couldn't do it on my own. So I never ever asked for help. So mistake number 2, tick. In this business, I have invested in, mentors, I've invested in masterminds, I've invested in people to help me with my mental health, my nervous system. So all of the things that have enabled me to be a more holistic person and a more holistic business owner. And for me, the biggest investment that I make and continue to make is in building a community around me, whether that is communities that I have paid to be part of or whether that is communities that I build who pay me to be part of my community. But having the right people in my world has made a massive, massive difference to me. In terms of team, I haven't yet reinvested in a permanent team. I outsource things as I need to outsource them. But I haven't yet gone down the route of team. But I will. That is part of my 5-year plan. But my plan has been based on what I want to do and at the speed that I want to grow it at, which for a lot of people think is slow, but that is my purpose. That is my strategy. So yeah, that's sort of me investing in me and my business has made a massive difference this time round.
Again, I think one of the pieces that really resonates with me is we talk about having a peer group or having a support group. And often we think of that as people cheerleading you and saying, come on, we're doing it. I always think of it a bit probably wrong with like Slimming World. It's great. Your family will all say, we want to help you lose weight. You're doing so well. And then they'll say, have a slice of cake though, enjoy yourself. You should treat yourself. Whereas for me, a really great peer group and a mastermind group is where you've got that accountability where they say to you, actually, should you have had that slice of cake? Does that meet with your goals? Was that a long-term decision? Was that a short-term decision? Because the trickiest thing in business is that it's such an open field that we can concentrate and play wherever we want to in that field. But often what we actually need to do is the thing that's maybe a little bit trickier and that we don't want to be held accountable for, and we sweep away with busy work. Would you?
Exactly.
What would you say to your younger self about choosing a coach? Because there's so many, I suppose we're all in the same. There's so many accountants, so many IT firms. There's so many coaches out there. What would be your kind of top 3 things that you'd say to somebody who was looking for a coach to kind of, to choose from them or to find the right match?
For me personally, the first thing, the most important thing is it has to be somebody whose values are aligned with mine. So it has to be somebody who has the same values, the same beliefs and the same way of being as a person, because I can't work with somebody, I don't think it works well if you try and work with somebody where there's a clash of values or personality. So that values piece is always a really important one for me. I think the second one for me is very much about somebody who has walked the walk. So somebody who has the experience, for me, would be far more important than somebody that's took a lot of boxes in terms of, qualifications and all of that type of stuff. I know there's some things where you've got to have a tick box for a qualification, and I've got tick boxes too. But I think, for me, it's the walk in terms of, somebody who has been there, done that, and experienced sort of what I want to experience. that makes a huge difference for me. And I think the third thing for me personally would be somebody who's got flexibility and doesn't try and stick you into a cookie cutter. This is the box that I train and this is the only way that you can grow a business, because I absolutely do not believe in that. There is no such thing as this is the only way you can build a business. The same as there's no such one way that you can, run that marathon. There's lots of different things that you can do. And I think this isn't really about a coach, but coming back to something I didn't mention at the beginning, we're going to tick box number 3 now in terms of Emma's mistakes in the early days. And for me, it was the financial support that I had in that business. The very, very first thing that I outsourced in my business before I even took on the staff member was bookkeeping and accountancy, because I don't do maths. I don't do anything that involves numbers. But that was the problem. It was an accountant who, and I'm not knocking the accountant here, but this was somebody who was there to tick the boxes, to do the tax return, to tell me what my VAT was, to do the payroll, to tick all of those boxes. For me now, whoever I work with, it's somebody that's on the journey with me, that is there to help me in a bigger way beyond just ticking boxes.
And I think that that's so important. Obviously, I'm going to say that, aren't I? But I do think that that's so important to have that, particularly because a lot of people don't really like finance, exactly like you've just said, and people, I think, can sometimes bury their head a little bit. Working with somebody that can really, just somebody that you can just have a 10-minute conversation with just about how your business is going and what the numbers are kind of indicating. It just helps you, I think, as a business owner to open your mind to other things that you wouldn't ordinarily see. And I do think, sadly, obviously I am an accountant, but sadly I think it's a missing in a lot of accountants. So, podcast is what one thing. Phil and I always talk about there are three levers really in business to help your business improve. You either cut costs, you either try to drive growth and increase your sales, or you work on efficiencies. So what's the one thing that you would share for everybody to take away from all of your, if you can condense it into one thing, Emma?
And it's got to be going right back to the beginning. It's got to be on getting clear on what that dream looks like. This is what I talk about in my business, so it has to be that really. It's getting clear on what your future looks like. So if you could live the perfect day, if you could live the perfect week, what would that look like? And that's not just in terms of your business, that is in terms of your life too. And because I think if you've got that clear vision as to where you want to take your business, where you want to be in terms of your lifestyle, I think it is much easier to build a business that enables you to get to that point. Otherwise, it's a bit like driving a car without sat-nav, isn't it? If you're heading to Manchester. I mean, I don't know if I'm going north or south if I'm heading to Manchester, but if I hadn't got the sat-nav in my car, I wouldn't have a clue where I was going. I may get there, but what a journey it's going to be, what a journey it's going to be. So for me, setting your sat-nav to know exactly where it is you're trying to get to is got to be the clear point. And that will change. That will grow as you grow. And as you become more confident in yourself, that dream will grow. But getting clear on what that vision is, for me, is absolutely the starting point. Lots of the things you spoke about, 100%, they're the things that are going to get you there. Get clear on that dream, get clear on that vision first.
Absolutely love it. And then we'll have a cheeky little shameless plug, Emma. So tell me, who is your ideal client? Who are you looking to kind of connect with? What's your kind of your perfect match where you can really drive the business to the moon, I suppose. And then how is best to connect with you?
So my absolute dream client is somebody who is passionate, ambitious and prepared to do the work for one. Somebody who's not thinking, I can sit overnight, I'm going to make 6 figures, because it doesn't work that way. So it's got to be somebody who's prepared to take the action. It's somebody who has reached a stall point in the business. So somebody who is, potentially they're making money, but they might not be making the amount of money that they want. Or they might be making money, but it is costing them the lifestyle. So they want to, strip it all back and go back to that point. And so for me, it's somebody ambitious who is not yet in that position where they can say, I love what I'm doing and I'm making the amount of money that I want to make. The absolute best place to connect with me is probably just go straight onto my website, emmahine.co.uk. Or I'm all over the socials. I am Emma Hine.
Thank you very much, Emma.
Wow. Emma was a complete inspiration, to say the least. What was your key takeaway from that chat, Hayley?
I think My key takeaway is that you really can have a business that you love, that fits the lifestyle that you want, and not just end up in a situation where, like so many people do, so you leave a job, you start a business thinking all these wonderful things, and the reality is you end up working harder for less money. For a lot of people, that's how it is. And I think what Emma brings to that is that you absolutely can live the dream. And what was your one thing, Phil, that you took away from that?
I think what really resonated with me is that the failure to bring on a coach and failure to get a plan early on, failure to join a peer group, all those things really resonated with me. And so many business owners that I meet are so driven to, look, I'm going to grow this business, we're going to hit £1 million, £2 million, whatever it might be, 500k, I'm not worried about what the amount is. But actually, it's more about lifestyle and margin. We do start the business to create value for our customers, we start the business for all the right reasons, but we do need to focus on those all-important numbers to make sure that we're actually happy doing what we do. Because if you're not happy as a business owner, how can you service your clients? So I've seen that story, and I see it so many times, and it's almost a little bit painful when you see that story again. And to be fair, it resonates that Emma seems a phenomenal choice of coach, doesn't she? She's been through the journey, she understands it. Yeah, I think fantastic.
As Emma said, more than I'm not saying that other people don't have, but she most definitely has walked the walk and definitely been on that journey herself. I always think it's really interesting to hear about what she would have done differently on that first journey, because isn't it really odd that we just don't ask for help, or we don't, like, we think we go from being like, obviously I used to work in in-house finance, and then as I said in the episode, you're kind of at the top of your game, you know exactly what you're doing, you know where you're going with it all, and then you leave and start this business and think you know everything. Not quite, but you do a little bit, because you're like, oh yeah, I was good at my job, and then you're just like, well, actually, you know nothing about running a business.
I think that's so true. I think that the point is we leave our employment quite often because we say, I can do this better. What do you think our listeners with a 10-person or more business should try as a result of listening to this podcast?
I think the obvious thing to say is that if they're not already working with a coach or within a peer group, that would be really helpful. I think just having other business owners that you can share the journey with is, as we've said before, it's actually makes a really big difference, and it's something that I think you don't think will make a difference. I'm actually going away next week with some of my accountancy and bookkeeper friends, and it's just gonna, just to have that space where you can just talk about the things that you can't really talk about with other people because they don't understand is really, really helpful to the business, but also to you as an individual as well on that journey. So that would definitely be one thing. And I think the second thing I would say is that if they are in a business that is running them instead of them running the business, to just know that it can be different and you can make changes to get to a place where you're running a business that actually is the business you want, not just one that you've ended up with. And what about you? What would you share?
I think I'd be pretty identical. Also say, I think for me, and maybe people like myself, it's as much an ego thing, and it's really weird because we wouldn't try and learn French or Spanish or boxing or anything like that without saying, do you know what, I'll hire a coach because I'll get there so much quicker with a coach. But in the world of business, I think, and that was what I was kind of alluding to with Emma, there's so many coaches. I mean, now that I've listened to and heard Emma speak, you think, wow, okay, I can see how she'd be a great transformative coach. And I think maybe that would be the piece, would be to have a look at some coaches, maybe look for some podcasts or some speeches that they've done and see if they are the kind of fit that you think, and then take that, and it is a huge kind of ego crushing move, much as it shouldn't be, but take that first step, reach out to them and say, yeah, look, I'm running a business that's pretty successful, but we're not making money, or that's consuming all my time, or that's this, could you help? Are you willing to step in? Can we have a meeting? And much like any meeting, as you learn as a business owner or even as an interviewee, when you're first looking for a job, you go there and they say, we work weekends, you say, yeah, we do overtime, yeah, we do this, yeah. Whereas when you go there as an equal party, which you would be doing with a coach, you'd be saying, look, this is what I bring to the table. What do you think you can bring to the table? Do you think we will be a good match? Because, of course, if you can find that coach where you've got that synergy, it could literally rocket your business.
I agree with that. I think the essence of what you were saying there is to really research and make sure that you're working with somebody that's the right person for you to work with. And I do think there is a lot of choice out there, as we've already said. But I think trying to find somebody, and Emma talked about it in her in her recording, that about working with somebody where your values align and you know that you're both trying to get to the same thing. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I tell you what, I think we should wrap it there. If you have enjoyed this, do us a favour, share the episode with someone else who's on the same journey as you, and we'll see you next time on What One Thing.